Hello everyone, it's time for another deck profile, this time on post-festival collection of my Alestiel deck. Or we could simply call this the Dress Up Alestiel deck, or Holy Angel Blessing Alestiel, whatever you want to say. So, after so long, like a year with no lyrical support, or at least no original Ride Line Alestiel support, we finally got some support in Festival Collection with a new form, or not really a new form, but a dress-up version of the original Ride Lines, except for the one with the grade 4. And I have to say, I kind of like it. The dress-up lineup is basically a second copy of the original forms of the Ride Lines, and I kind of like it. It's not really a new form, it's mainly more so that they're cosplaying. That's basically all it is. And this time's cosplay is Easter themed, because in the Japanese side, it's Easter. But unfortunately for Festival Collection in the English side, it's summer. So I guess they can still dress this up at summer, but whatever. But anyway, after a year of practically no support for the original Ride Lines, it's just good to see more support for the original Ride Lines. And I have to say, I really like this new deck. It's actually a lot of fun. It makes use of the original Alestiel, hence why you still see this here, and it's not part of the Ride deck. And overall, I still like Alestiel because of its style of with the wing mechanic. There's 3 variants of this deck: the white wing variant, the black wing variant, and the dual wing variant. Mine is still playing a bit dual wing as the deck is supposed to play, but a little more so white wing now. Because, yeah, white wings is practically stronger and more aggressive. Black wings is just all about negatively impacting your opponent. But mine is a little bit more white wing, but still plays by dual wing because there's a card that makes dual wing and another card that makes it consistent. And with this new form of Alestiel, or this dress-up version, it has got a lot easier to go dual wing. And overall, I just really like it. But anyway, I do need to explain the core concept of the deck. So like I said, it revolves around the wing mechanic, aka what is the grade in your bind zone, aka the only grade in the bind zone. So you want to make sure you want to keep exactly 1 card in the bind zone mainly. So if you're at odd grade, you basically turn yourself into white wings. If you have even grades, aka grade 0s and grade 2s, which is the more consistent one, and grade 4s, you go to black wings. So just keep that in mind because yes, there is another way to add an extra card in the bind zone, the dual wing card, spoiler alert. So that can be a little bit of a weakness right here. And if your opponent can actually bind your cards, this might actually cause a bit of problem because that's actually a huge weakness against the deck. And another thing that you have to keep in mind about this deck is that there's no countercharging in this deck. Counterblast is now being more used now because of this one new card. And this deck never had any countercharging in the first place, but originally it did not exactly have too many counterblast issues. But now, because we got this card, counterblast has been a little more used than usual, especially with white wings uses more counterblast than soul. So just keep those things in mind. But overall, it's still a very strong deck, and it's time to get with the deck profile. With, of course, the Ride deck, we go to Monochromatic Personality Alestiel, just your starter. To the grade 1 in Indessa Sky Alestiel, where, when on place on Vanguard, you bind the top card of the deck. And then you activate the following abilities based on the wing state. If you're on white wings, it gets this skill. When you would ride from the Ride deck, instead of discarding a card, you can Soul Blast 1 instead, which is basically good if you go first or second. In the black wing state, your opponent's grade 1 or less cards cannot attack this unit, aka only good if you went first, because you go first, you ride to your grade 1, your opponent goes second, they're at grade 1, so they just can't attack this card. But you mainly want to use the white wing one, but it does trigger the black wing one very often, especially because you're at grade 1, just letting you know. To the grade 2, we go to Shining As Is Alestiel, where when placed on Vanguard, put the bind zone card back to the bottom deck to bind the top card. And then you play one of these abilities depending on what wing state. White wings, you can counterblast 1, crit +1 to end turn. Black wing state, your opponent cannot guard with trigger units from their hand against this attack. Well, if you go dual wings, it's pretty devastating, but if you're in white wings, that's just pretty aggressive, especially on an early game with a grade 2. But no boosting can be a bit iffy because main stuff starts at grade 3, but sometimes early game, they don't even have the guard value, so yeah, that can be very aggressive, especially denying them the counterblast. In which we go to the grade 3, Holy Angel of Blessing Alestiel. So the dress up is for Archangel of Twin Wings Alestiel, meaning it counts as that name. Just keep in mind about its skill because this is the original one, and the original name of this Celestial will matter. But this card will still count as this Celestial practically. So meaning, if you ride this on top of this one, it still counts as Persona Ride. And that goes the other way around as well. Just keep that in mind. But anyway, the skill is at the beginning of your main phase, choose a card from your bind zone, put it to your hand, and then bind the top card of your deck. This is so you get a basically late +1 per turn, while also changing your wing state per turn. And to its skills, in Blackwing state, once per turn you can discard a card from your hand, search your deck for a Blackwing ability card and call it to rearguard, aka your even grade cards. There's actually 2 good targets for this, but one of them is your main one, the other one's a backup, and that will be explained later. The White Wing ability is, at the end of this card text, you can count as 1, discard a card from your hand, search your deck for the original Alestiel. It has to be this one from your deck and ride it as stand and drive -1 into the end turn. Of course, if you search from deck, you shuffle it. AKA 2 Vanguard attacks with 1 turn, and it's not considered restanding, so no counter heal for this. And I have to say, this is actually going to be pretty strong comboing with the second Alestiel attack, because the second Alestiel attack actually will have basically its main abilities. This one is basically more of a setup to go to the other one. And I have to say, this is just pretty strong, basically multi-Vanguard attack. And not only that, the consistency of searching from the Black Wings. If you're in Black Wing state and you prefer being in White Wing, you can actually fix that with the Black Wing ability. And that will be explained why later. But overall, it still contains the original ability of the Alestiel, where you just bind the top card of your deck while returning that old bind card to your hand and changing the wing state ability. But I would have to say it doesn't contain the main abilities of the original Alestiel, but it basically sets up for the original Alestiel. Basically like an extended play where you just basically get yourself another attack, but more aggressive. But nothing else to say now. In which we finish the ride deck, where we now go to the main deck with the main form of Archangel of Twin Wing Alestiel, in which it has that first same skill, where at the beginning of the main phase, choose a card from the bind zone, put it to your hand, and then bind the top card of your deck, changing the wing state ability. But the wing abilities are different, and it's actually the original part why this one was pretty strong and aggressive. The white wing ones gives it plus 5k and 1 crit. Yeah, 18k attacker, 2 crits. And the Black Wings ability is that during your turn, all your opponent's units get minus 5k power. You dual wing this is going to be pretty powerful, and it's actually very easy to dual wing this now, especially from the last lyrical support. And it's also free, just keep that in mind. All you do is just revolve around your bind zone. And basically the idea is you ride this first, and then you superior ride this. Basically, as Dress Up, she's on the ground. Once she removes her dress, she goes to her true form, or at least reveals her true power, aka her flying up. So I have to say it doesn't exactly change the deck too much other than 1 extra Vanguard attack mainly, but more aggressive now. But in that, there's really not much to say. But I am running 4 copies because you mainly want to superior ride it from the deck. You can superior ride from hand, and in drop zone it's just useless. But there is a way to recycle these, so at the same time you can cut them, because too many can still be a little cloggy. But at the same time, you really want to superior ride these from deck, and there are many cases that they're in the damage zone and I'm just losing copies, so I'm running 4. And then, for further Persona riding, you do want to run the extra copies of Blessing Alestiel. Also keep in mind that you also want to be re-riding to this Alestiel. And yes, you can Persona ride over on top of the original. Keep that one in mind as a reminder, but you really want to be re-riding back to the Dress Up Alestiel, because the whole point of this deck is basically you ride Dress Up Alestiel to superior ride Archwing Alestiel to get back into Blessing Alestiel next turn, and then do the combo play over again. That's the point of it, hence why you still need to run those extra copies of this one. Archwing, you could run less copies since there is ways to recycle it, spoiler alert, but you really want to be rewriting this one. And then finally to the last grade 3, Essential Vocal Ikeo. This one has the skill where when you place something on Vanguard, you can bind this unit to draw a card, which will trigger the second skill. When this card is bound, you enter dual wing state, aka you can activate both white wing and black wing abilities until the end of your opponent's turn. Yep, this is the main dual wing card. The only thing is, using the first ability will give you another bind card, which can hinder the deck, because yeah, sometimes you will have both an odd grade and an even grade in your bind zone, which will basically say lock all your abilities. Hence why going up against an opponent that can bind your cards can be a problem. With this card at least, at least even with the first ability. Against a bind deck, this card can actually still save you because it overrides the condition of needing to actually having those specific grades in your bind zone. But the part where it adds itself to the bind zone can still be a problem depending on the matchup. Still, the main part about this card is activating Dual Wing State, hence why you run 4. And now to the consistency card that makes the Dual Wing State happen is this one. Privilege Potential Phasniel. So on placed on rearguard, you can Soul Blast 1 if your Vanguard is Alestiel. Choose a card from your bind zone and put it back to your hand. And then choose a card from your hand and put it to your bind zone. AKA, you want to bind this card. Or AKA, this corrects your wing state basically. Because yeah, you can choose any card from your hand to put it to your bind zone. You can correct your wing state with this, but the main big one is, well, E-Keel. You want to go to Dual Wing State, hence the consistency of going to Dual Wing State. So yeah, this is just an instant 4 just for that one skill. But the second skill is a Blackwing ability because it's a grade 2, where when this card attacks the Vanguard, you can counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's grade 3 or greater Vanguards, it gets minus 5k power. That's going to be very powerful, especially if you're in a Blackwing Vanguard, or even a Dual Wing one, because that's minus total 10k right there. That's going to be very nasty. But you mainly use this for the first skill, hence why it's a 4-of. But the second skill is an added bonus. Because like I said, Counterblast can be an issue in this deck, because White Wings revolves around more Counterblast and this one is a more White Wing deck. If you're playing this as a more Black Wing deck, then that's not really an issue. And then to a Black Wing finisher, because you can go Dual Wing here, Fleeting Longing Boreal, where in Black Wings you can Soul Blast 3 on place, choose one of your opponent's units for every 2 rear guards, including self with even grades and minus 5k. Any rearguards that reach at least 0 power will go to the bottom of the deck. So if you're able to choose multiple units, you can even remove your opponent's rearguards. But yeah, draining your opponent's power even further can be very nice, especially if you have a good number of even grade lineup. I am in a way thinking about taking this out because other than being able to remove your opponent's rearguards, it doesn't actually do much now with choosing multiple units. Soul is not an issue for this deck, but most of the time I only choose one unit just to remove the rear guard. But I think I could get more value out of a Soul Blast 3, you could say, especially with the one that corrects your wing state. But that's still a pretty good card. In which finally we go to Advent Stroke Shadiel, where you can counterblast 1, put this as soul to draw a card, and then choose one card in your bind zone, increase its grade by 1, aka another card to correct your wing state. That's why you run this card. It corrects your wing state. Just in case that you are unable to do it through other means, you just use this as a backup. And you mainly want to be in White Wings. But it does have this second skill where in Black Wing state, your opponent cannot attack this card or choose this card by card ability. So yeah, that can be pretty powerful too with that protection, especially the fact that it can correct its wing state. That's the only point of this card. So that's it for the grade 2 lineup. To the grade 1 lineup, we go to Spokesperson of Heavenly Voice, Hergiel, which in White Wing state, you can counterblast 1 on place on rear guard from hand. During the main phase, you can counterblast 1, choose a card with White Wings from your drop zone and call it to rear guard, aka your grade 1s and grade 3s. You do have 2 good targets in this deck. There was that one grade 3 Angel in White Wing state gets plus 10k power and can put itself to soul, but I'm not running that in this deck because lack of space. But other than that, I don't really run 4 of these because usually you don't put too many good drop zone targets, let's just say. And also lack of space, and usually getting those rear guards is not really much of an issue. And also the amount of good targets to call at a specific timing is also kind of lacking sometimes, hence why I just run 2. And then we go to Wings of Rainbow Glow Amiel. In White Wings on place on rear guard, you can counterblast 1 while your opponent's at grade 3. For every 3 odd grade units, choose 1 rear guard, it gets plus 5k power, 1 crit. If you're able to pull off the full field of odd grade units, your whole front row basically will become a 2 crit attack. That is pretty powerful right there. That is full on aggression. And yes, this is a more White Wing variant, so very likely chance of getting all 3 attacks with 2 crits each is actually quite likely sometimes. But it's not too common, especially now we're playing a little more Dual Wings, so where you do have those grade 2s that just corrects your consistency binds. That does correct your consistency for wings, but just that 1 extra attack with crit is just very powerful. Now, I only run 2 because Counterblast. This deck uses more Counterblast than usual. And then finally, together with you, Saphiel. So on Playstone Rearguard, choose a grade 3 Alestiel from your drop zone and put it to the bottom deck. This is so you can recycle your Archwing of Alestiel for your superior ride, basically. That's the main point why you run this card. But the second skill makes it better to combo off with the Dress Up Alestiel, because in White Wing state, in the back row, when your Alestiel is placed on Vanguard during battle, stand this unit. Yeah, basically, double boosting the Vanguard. That's basically the point of this card. Until we get a rearguard that can restand itself, at least for White Wings, this card is mainly for the Vanguard. And then finally, 4 PGs, running Angel 1 for theming reasons. And then we go to the Overtrigger, because Overtrigger, 8 crits, 3 fronts, because you get a free card from your hand every turn and you can actually deck out pretty easily. And finally, 4 heals, 2 being counter heals. So that's it for this deck profile on my Dress Up Alestiel deck. What do you guys think of it? Honestly, I think it's just a pretty fun deck. I really like that we finally got more support for the original ride lines for Lyrical. I was a bit worried that they kind of stopped making support for it. In fact, a new form, or aka a new version of it, is very surprising to me that they actually did that. Because I was not expecting the original ride lines, other than the main one, will actually get something new. But we did, and I'm very happy for it. In fact, I really like Alestiel a lot for its style of basically wings. So that's why I mainly like this deck, and I kind of like the Angels overall. And now with the new Dress Up Alestiel, it just became so much stronger with now the issue of Counterblast. Which now I will have to ask, what other cards would you recommend for this deck? One card I do recommend, and I probably will be playing over this, is the grade 3 that can become a 23k attacker without Persona Ride and then put itself to Soul, because that also becomes a pretty good call target from the drop zone. That's kind of the only other card I can think of right now. But other than that, what other cards would you recommend? There is also that one new grade 2 from Festival Collection for this deck. Unfortunately, that's a random bind, so I'm not going to run that card. So hence why you don't see it at the deck at all. Other than those cards, what other cards would you recommend? But other than that, that's for this, and see you all next time.